Hi, welcome back to the Network Plus Certification video series. I'm Mike Redmond, Master Trainer, here to help guide you through your successful journey of becoming a Network Plus certified technician. We're going to walk through a wide variety of topics, starting with basic network concepts all the way through network management and security. In this segment, we're going to take a look at managing risk. I'll describe the industry standards for risk management, discuss contingency planning while examining safety standards and actions. When it comes to risk management, especially IT risk management, it's a process. It's a process of how organizations deal with bad actions. We call those attacks. Attack can take shape in many different forms, whether it be intentional or unintentional, acts of war or natural disasters. Our job is to try to minimize the impact of these actions, and we do that by minimizing overall risk. One of the best ways to minimize risk is through policy. It helps us define what equipment our people use, as well as how they organize data and what actions that they take to ensure the security of the organization as a whole. One of these instruments is called an acceptable use policy. You may hear it as an AUP. This is a document that governs the overall privacy and consent to monitoring of your employees, as well as the legal or authorized use of computing assets. We also govern by network policies and who may access the network and who cannot, how it may be accessed, and what and when is accessible and to whom. Embedded in a lot of these network policies will be other organizational policies such as a VPN policy, a password policy, and maybe even an encryption policy. Another method in which we manage risk in our environment is through change management. This is basically just the adherence to the policies that we've set. Every organization should have a change control board. They manage the overall environment of our IT assets, and this is the group that will investigate, test, and authorize change within that environment. There generally are two levels that you'll need to deal with, a strategic level change and an infrastructural level change. The strategic level change is initiated by management and is generally a pretty major size and scope. The infrastructure level change is initiated by a requesting department. The Network Plus exam focuses on the infrastructure level change. So how do these changes occur? Well, they all start with a request. Generally, they're called a change request. It's an official document that contains details of the proposed change, and it usually includes the type of change being requested, any configuration procedures that are required, a rollback process in case something goes wrong, what the overall potential impact to the organization may be, and some other form of official notification. The change management team or the change control board is there to provide the official approval for these change requests. Generally, they'll have deadlines for submission, and they meet regularly to discuss any change requests that have been submitted. So what does it take to make these changes happen? First, of course, you need to procure the equipment that you wish to install and then train the operators as to how to install it. If there's any downtime that's going to be required, this is a piece of information that the change control board is going to want to know. And then, of course, you're going to issue notification of the change to any affected users. Again, since we're minimizing risk and trying to manage the overall infrastructure, it's important to document all the changes that you make. This includes any network configuration changes, as well as any network additions. You'll also want to log the physical and logical changes that you make as well. The next, and probably the best way to minimize risk in our environment, is to patch our systems. Almost all software and hardware are subject to patching. This includes printers, routers, wireless access points, desktops, and any other programmable logic controllers. Some of the most common patch types you'll see are operating system patch. Microsoft releases them every Tuesday, device driver and firmware patches. These usually include feature changes or updates, or most likely are addressing some sort of flaw or vulnerability with the software. Whether the patch is indicated as either a major or a minor patch is going to determine your approach to how you're going to patch those devices. Regardless the approach, it's paramount that you first research the patch that you think that you're going to install. Don't just install patches just because they're available. You need to understand what might break after you install this patch. We do this by testing. You should choose a small group of test systems and apply this patch. Note any changes in stability and then advise whether or not the patch is stable enough for your environment. Before deploying these patches, it's important to back up your systems. Each platform, regardless of whether it's software or hardware, has a backup procedure. This way, if anything does go wrong, you can roll back to the last stable state of that environment. And then, of course, you want to track those backups. Follow a logical and orderly rotation and retention plan. These are generally going to be governed by your organizational policy, and some are even governed by state and local legislation. Next is training. Training our users to act and react responsibly in our IT environments is paramount. Remember, your end users are the first line of defense to your network and your data. Security awareness training should be held at least annually, if not more often. Within this training, you should be advising your users of any security policies, password policies, system and workplace safety, as well as advising them on types of attack like social engineering and malware. When designing our networks, we take care to try to eliminate any single points of failure. Failure of one system will bring down an entire process or workflow, or worse yet, an entire organization. The solution to this is using selective redundancy. This will help reduce the complexity, cost, and administration of your IT environments, especially when it comes to critical assets. You should identify all critical assets to the organization and determine the bare minimum functional state. You should also identify any unique IT equipment, such as web servers or edge routers or a single printer or plotter that is mission critical to the environment. The reason that we do this is because most organizations have a requirement for high availability. To maintain this high availability, we employ the key principle of failover, which is the ability for backup systems to detect when the master has failed so they can take over. Another way to ensure high availability is somewhat of a new concept of virtual IPing, a single address shared by multiple systems. We talked about this briefly when we discussed the differences between NAT and PAT. Essentially, what you're doing is you're using protocols like the virtual router redundancy protocol or the host standby router protocol. That's Cisco proprietary. However, it does allow you to have multiple failover devices to minimize the damage of any one single failure. These protocols combine multiple routers with a single virtual IP, which the clients use as their default gateway. Next, we'll talk about some of the standard business documents that every organization should have, such as a service level agreement. This is a document between a customer and a service provider that provides the scope, quality, and terms of service to be provided. You can think of the service level agreement as your bill from the electric company. You've entered into an agreement with the electric company that in return for a fee, that's your bill, they are going to provide power to your home. Critical points that should be included in every service level agreement is the definition of the service provided, any equipment that is either maintained by the organization or by the service provider themselves, and any technical support that will be available. The next document would be an MOU, or a Memorandum of Understanding. It defines an agreement between two parties in place of a formal legal document. It defines the duties and responsibilities and even the time frame and costs and contacts of the two organizations. Next, we have the multi-source agreement. This document goes into detail any interoperability of the two organizations' components. Next would be the scope of work, or SOW. This is a legal contract between a vendor and a customer that defines the service and products that the vendor agrees to supply and the time frame in which they have agreed to supply them. Next, let's talk about how to be prepared for disaster. It really all starts with understanding the vulnerabilities that are present in your network. You can't get rid of all vulnerability just the way you can't get rid of all risk. It's just how we manage them. We do this by starting with vulnerability scanners. This is a scanner that will inspect for vulnerabilities and create some sort of report. Some of the most popular are the MBSA, the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, Nmap, Nessus, and OpenVAS. Vulnerability management is often the first step to patch management. It is an ongoing process. You should constantly be looking for and identifying new and emerging vulnerabilities within your organization and then applying the appropriate remediation steps. Next is penetration testing, or pen testing. This is usually performed by what we identify as white hats, who are very skilled operators and who understand the target and know potential vulnerabilities of that target. After each pen test, a report would be supplied of any detected vulnerabilities. There are very specialized applications that are used for pen testing, like ARECrack and Metasploit. Those are far beyond the scope of the Network Plus examination. However, as you progress through your career, you will undoubtedly be exposed to them. Next would be contingency planning. What are we planning against? Well, we're planning against any conceivable type of incident. We do this by documenting our contingency plan. It's a document that shows how to limit the damage and recover quickly and how to respond to incidents. The 5 basic steps when it comes to incident response are to identify, address, evaluate, recover, and then implement any preventative measures. These steps are extremely important to remember, especially for the Network Plus certification. Continuing with contingency planning, we have disaster recovery planning. A disaster recovery plan deals directly with recovering your primary infrastructure from a disaster. A disaster is defined as an event that disables or destroys substantial amounts of infrastructure, such as a hurricane or a flood or a fire. You should identify within your disaster recovery plan the members of your disaster recovery team. This will include members from management, IT, and generally facilities and security. Also, within your disaster recovery plan, it should be identified your RPO and RTO. These are your recovery point objectives and your recovery time objectives. These are critical calculations to perform. Your recovery point objective is the state of data when backup is restored, and it determines how much data the organization can sustain loss before it starts to lose money. Your recovery time objective is the time needed to restore any asset to full functionality. Again, these are 2 critical calculations to perform. Also included in our contingency planning is consideration for backup facilities. You will need to determine whether your organization requires a cold site, a hot site, or a warm site. Largely, this decision will be driven by the recovery point and recovery time objectives. A cold site consists basically of a building, raw facilities, and raw utility. It can take more than a few days to bring a cold site online, whereas a warm site It's similar to a cold site, but it adds a complete hardware-software infrastructure, but no data, or possibly even no ISP connection. It usually only takes about 48 hours to bring online, but bearing in mind that you'll be bringing a lot of your own assets with you. A hot site generally is where you are going to do your daily and monthly backups. You may need to bring the most recent backup to restore from. However, any other backups are usually already there. It's as close as you can come to a duplicate of your primary site, and it only takes a few hours to get set up and running. Next comes forensics, specifically computer forensics. Computer forensics is the science of gathering, preserving, and presenting evidence stored on a computer or any form of digital media that is presentable in a court of law. There are specific certifications to perform these actions, such as the CFCE, the CCE, and the GCFA. For a forensic examiner, their primary duty is to secure the present state of media. That's all media. That includes RAM and hard drives, as well as cache, and to prevent tampering, and of course, to conduct a thorough forensic analysis. So our job in preparation for a computer forensic analysis to be had, we are considered the first responders. We have certain basic responsibilities, such as securing the area of any suspected incident. That includes blocking any unauthorized observers and to prevent any potential disturbance. Next, you want to document everything you see. This includes preserving the state of any equipment and any electronic media. And then, and only then, if asked, you'll want to collect any immediate evidence. Typically, it's conducted by a certified examiner. However, there are certain time-sensitive things that you may be asked to begin collecting. If asked to do so, remember your first and only priority at this point is to maintain the chain of custody. This is a paper trail that shows what happened, when it happened, and by whom. Next, and this is usually reserved for management, is how you're going to interface with authorities. Again, there would be several procedures that you would be exposed to, such as a legal hold, which is a process of preparing evidence for legal proceedings, or you may be asked to perform e-discovery or electronic discovery. This is a process of requesting evidence of an electronic nature and providing it in a legal way. This is often centered around email. Next is general environmental safety. Managing the risks to employees' physical health is as important as managing the risk to the data. This includes things like electrical safety and protecting against electrostatic discharge, as well as the physical and installation safety. You can add to this by always using the buddy system when you lift heavy objects and lifting with your legs and never your back. Also, by practicing good cable management to prevent someone from coming through and tripping over a stray cable. Again, we as network administrators have a part to play when it comes to installation management and safety, such as power. We need to ensure that the proper power source and grounding is provided for all of our equipment. Securely and properly mounting our equipment in appropriate racks, installing the rails first and then locking them into place and then installing the device. And always being aware of environmental concerns such as HVAC. Remembering that data centers should always be set up in a hot row and a cold row, and they should be maintained at an average temperature of right around 68 degrees with about 50% humidity. Remember, electrical equipment does not like moisture. And always be sure to know where and how to identify the proper fire suppression for your organization. Know the different types of fire extinguishers. Class A, Class B, and Class C fire extinguishers are the ones that the Net Plus will concentrate on. You should know the emergency procedures for your building, how to get out, what is the fire escape plan, where are the rally points outside the building. These all go into good infrastructure and physical security. You should know which doors are required to fail safe and fail secure. This is generally going to be governed by local law and legislation. However, you should know the difference. To fail open, the doors will default to an unlocked state in case of emergency. To fail secure, the doors will fail to a locked or closed state in case of emergency. It's also important to conduct regular and I would say at least annual fire drills and other types of emergency events to prevent confusion or chaos when an actual emergency occurs. Well, there you have it. Pretty simple, right? I know, it can be a lot of information coming at you all at once, but don't worry, I'm here to guide you every step of the way. You can do this. Just remember, study hard, lots of practice questions, and you will succeed. You will become a Network Plus certified technician. I'll see you next time.